Hey guys, alright, so this is the session that we were looking at today. Just to run through a couple of editing things really quickly, just wanted to show you how to compile your takes together a little bit better, considering you're all going to have to do that and it's part of the assessment. So, just quickly, let's just have a quick look at this vocal track that we recorded. Me reading out an article from Batuta Advocate. Whole heap of... So what I may end up doing is just actually saving the session. Nothing. So we've got clearly a split file here and then the real take. Yes? Okay, cool. Get my newsreader voice on. Cool. Okay, so we've got an actual take here. So what I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit and we're going to pump out a whole heap of markers onto here for things that we need to cut out and things we want to keep. So to do that, if I have a section, what I can do is hit enter on the numeric keypad and I will end up bringing up a new memory location. I don't care about what these are called. These are purely cut points for me, so I'm not actually going to be keeping them in my session. It's just to lay out everything. So let's find them. I'm going to do this real quick. New study finds original use for milk crates was to move dairy products around. Although milk crates... So this little section here is no good, and there's a big pop that I made with my mouth here. So we find the next good take. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, the humble furniture and self-defense item was originally developed as a means of moving milk cartons around, a new report has found. Cool, so we got another one. So I can be doing this either with markers, like so, to help me know what to edit, or I can be cutting it live. Depending on what we want to do, some might be better, some might be worse. We've got to figure it out. So I'm just going to put markers in across here. And this is going to help for the post-production people who are working on podcasts and who are working on sound replacements, because as we get through here, you'll see that if I want to actually create different sets of markers, it helps me to snap to different sections. So if you have a script, we can rename this as part of the start of our script. And as we go through, if you have a look in your windows and you have a look at memory locations, we can actually map them all out here. And we can look at them instead of bars and beats as minutes and seconds. So if you imagine that this was footsteps or thing being dropped or whatever else they were, you can actually map out and create your asset list within the session. So it makes it way easier when we actually get to editing point if you have a clip that you're sound replacing, like the Doctor Who one, or if you are just mapping out potential assets that might go into your script. Cool, so let's have a look. We've only got 2 minutes of it, so it shouldn't take too long to pump out markers. So I'm just going to play it back and hit the markers as we go. I don't actually have to stop playback. I can just keep playing and create markers, and even if it keeps playing along, it'll create the marker from wherever I hit the button. Local museum curator Elsie Kuroda, 73, has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results. She says, while many others believe that milk crates are simply viewed as cinder blocks for hipsters or makeshift seats for hipsters, they actually have a long history of being used for other stuff. After consulting historical photographs, we were surprised to find that as well as obvious uses like storing car parts in the shed, disabling knife-wielding attackers, and standing on to change the light bulb in the laundry, they were often used to move milk cartons around. Many years ago. Later, we were surprised to discover that this was their earliest recorded use. It is therefore fair to assume that this was probably the original purpose of this remarkable invention. Although if anyone else has early photographs of milk crate utilization, we would love to see them. When questioned, a spokesperson for dairy farmers said that all milk crates remained the property of dairy farmers and he would personally tune up anyone who was using milk crates for unauthorized purposes. My daughter living in Melbourne says that My daughter living in Melbourne says that they use them for seats at cafes. That makes me sick. My daughter living in Melbourne says that they use them for seats at cafes. That makes me sick. My daughter living in Melbourne says that they use them for seats in cafes. That makes me sick, especially considering the fact that these cafes don't even use the end. Cool. Okay, so we've got a selection of markers throughout this. Now, I'm going to show you this process for quick editing. If we talk through our modes, we're in slip mode at the moment, which means that if I highlight anything, also this clip marker is driving me crazy because I had it on from before. So let's hide that line so I can actually highlight when I want to. Cool, so if I was to highlight a section and delete it right now, that's totally fine because I'm in slip, I end up with this gap. Now, this is fine, but if we were to do this across all of these little sections that we need to cut out, we're going to end up with a whole heap of gaps, then we're going to have to drag our audio files to match up again. So if we go into shuffle mode and we go up to the end, as an example, if I want to cut out a little section here and I delete it, see that this end section moves down closer, so they butt up against each other. We want that. So if I find the section that was poorly said, like this one. My daughter living in Melbourne says that My daughter living in Melbourne says that they use them for seats at cafes. That makes me sick. My daughter living in Melbourne. Cool. So this whole section we want to get rid of. So if I highlight this roughly, we'll fix up the timing in a second. But if I get rid of that and delete it, these two sections butt up against each other. So now what we're going to do is just find all the dodgy bits. Although if anyone else has early photographs of they were often used to move milk cartons around. Many years ago. It is therefore fair stuff. After consulting historical photographs, we were surprised to find that as well as obvious uses like strong car parts in the shed, storing car parts in the shed. So just checking that there wasn't anything else in that section. Delete that bit, come down to here. Local museum curator, Cool, and just a couple more. I think it's just this last one. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, awesome. The humble furniture so if I delete all of these, you'll see that we now have a cut down clip, but also because all of our tracks have been moving, our location and our markers don't actually make any sense anymore. So we don't need to have them as part of our session. I can, apparently not. I thought if I held down shift I'd be able to delete them easier. Delete all. There we go. Boom. So now we are back to a fresh session. So all of this stuff we also don't want because this was all the intro junk. So I can highlight this section, delete it, and now my session is all moved down. So we just have to figure out whether these breaks actually sound authentic and make sense. So let's have a quick look. Products around. Although milk crates have... So we got some breaths and stuff in here. We'll fix that in a second. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, has found. Local museum curator. Yeah, you got to make sure it sounds natural. If we butt every waveform up against each other, it'll sound like a robot speaking really quickly. So let's have a look at this. A long history of being used for other stuff. After consulting... That could probably have a little bit more of a breath. So because we're still in shuffle mode, I can actually extend it out a little bit. Used for other stuff. After consulting his... Cool. Sounds a bit more human. The light bulb in the laundry. They were often used... Ooh, that's a bit of a weird one. Let's have a look. And standing on to change the light bulb in the laundry. They were often used to move milk cartons around years. So let's trim it up. Change the light bulb in the laundry. They were often used to move milk... Cool. Better. Next one. ...on purpose of this remarkable invention. Although if anyone else... Cool, apart from the breath. ...who was using milk crates for unauthorized purposes. My daughter living in... Tame this one up a little bit and just get rid of that lip smack. Purposes. My daughter... Bit too long. My daughter living in Melbourne says that they use them for seats in cafes. That makes me sick, especially considering the fact that these cafes don't even use real milk. Awesome. Okay, so we've got an edit. Now, let's have a look at some of the issues within this recording. First things first, there's a lot of breaths, there's a lot of other weird clicks and smacks and other things that we want to clear up. Second of all is it's quite quiet, so we're going to need to compress it. So let's go into our dynamics and let's put a gate on. And what we're going to do is try and remove those breaths in between. So if we have a bit of a zoom in and look for a section that has some breaths, get to hear my voice on repeat, so that's fun. Let's loop this. Cool. Sounds real weird right now. The humble crates was to move dairy products around. So this is what we're really focusing on, this little breath in here. So what we're going to do is we want, with our gate, everything that goes over our threshold, we're going to keep, and anything that's under our threshold is going to get turned down. So if we tweak some of our settings here, make it a little bit faster so that as soon as I speak, it will trigger the threshold to open, and a little bit longer so that it holds on and doesn't cut out in between words, and a little bit more of an intense ratio so it turns it down a little bit more. Let's have a look. Was to move dairy products around. Although milk. Cool, so that breath there is still audible. Was to move dairy products around. So let's bring this threshold up so that quieter sounds are sitting below the threshold. Crates was to move dairy products around. Although a little bit more. Crates was to move dairy products around. Yeah. Also, my bad, because it's still in bypass. So let's turn it out of bypass. Crates was to move dairy products around. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, crates was to move dairy products around. Cool, so you see now it's starting to cut out a few in-between sections of words. Got to be careful with this threshold, we don't want to push it too far. Crates was to move dairy products around. Although milk crates have a multitude... Cool, so it's starting to sit down a little bit further. Now if we want it to really push the sound up, what this is doing is saying how far do we want to turn those quiet sounds down. Let's go all the way. Crates was to move dairy products around. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, the humble crates was to move... Okay, nearly there. Crates was to move dairy products around. Although milk crates have a multitude of uses, the humble crates was to move dairy products around. Although... Cool, so it's a little bit better. We've cleaned up a little bit of the sound. Now let's get to the important one. We can come back and tweak these settings in a bit. What we're going to look at is our compressor. Now if we zoom out, we can see that there are some real peak loud sections here and some really quiet words in these smaller little sections. So what we're going to look for is a piece of audio that has some loud bits and some quiet bits. So I'm going to highlight this phrase here, and if we zoom in, we're going to look at our compressor and we're going to adjust our settings based on these small guys versus the really loud ones. So let's put on a compressor. Now to teach this, you can use any, they're all the same. The settings are the same in all of them. I like to teach using the Pro compressor, so we're going to pull that one up. And this is doing our opposite to our gate. So everything that goes over our threshold gets turned down and everything that's underneath it stays untouched. So if we think about the way that this waveform is reacting, we have loud bits that we want to turn down to be the same volume as our quiet bits. These quiet little sections in here, I don't want to turn down anymore. So this is where our threshold is important. So my threshold should be sitting just above these guys, where the top of my cursor is right now, and it should be then turning down these peaks off the top. So let's play it back and find the appropriate threshold setting. LC Kuroda, 73, has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origins of the multi-purpose item. LC Kuroda. So you can see right now those large peaks. This guy right here is going over the threshold. And if we go and find some of our quiet little words, they're quite under it. We could push it a little bit further because we want radio, so we want it to be pretty heavily compressed. That means that now some of these will be going over a little bit, but these guys will be going considerably over. So that's great. So now we have to decide how intensely do we want to turn it down. Normally for vocals I sit somewhere between 4 and 6 to 1, around about there. So let's split the difference and go somewhere randomly in the middle. If we highlight this section now, I have to pay attention to my attack and release, and what I'm looking for is that my gain reduction on here is moving naturally for the type of sound I'm working with. So if I am working with vocal, I'm speaking quite fast, so I want it to react pretty quickly, And I don't want it to turn off after every little syllable, because then it may start to sound choppy and a little bit weird. So I need it to hold for the right amount of time, but also not hold for too long, because otherwise the same settings will be applied to the entire waveform. So let's play it back.
LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost 2 years.
See, this is really rapid.
Into the origins of the multi-purpose item. LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost.
This is holding for way too long, so it doesn't represent. That's still going. It doesn't represent the words. So we need to find a nice sweet spot in the middle.
LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost.
About there. Looks pretty good. Okay, now, by the gain reduction, I'm turning down by about 9 dB on the loud words and about 6 dB. My makeup gain here is just designed to return some volume to things that we've turned down. So anything that I turn up here, I'm turning the quiet waveforms up, and I'm turning the loud ones back up to close to their original volume. So if I'm only giving about 6 dB of reduction to everything across the board, I only want to give about 6 dB of makeup gain. So let's have a look.
Museum curator LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results.
Awesome. Way clearer, way more even. Now our gate is a little bit choppy. We could play around with the settings on here for a bit longer, but the other way that we can look at this is if we look at our plugins and we go to some of our noise reduction ones. We have something like a dialogue denoise, which is really good for the hiss, but there is one in here called breath control. And what this does a really good job of is for vocals specifically and dialogue specifically. It removes little sections of the breaths and the awkward little sections in between. So I'm going to move this down. I'm just going to bypass this for a second so we can hear the difference, but I'm going to go in here, turn on my breath control, and it's kind of like a magic gate where it has an algorithm that does it for you. So if we play this back.
LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results. She says, while many others believe that milk crate... Local museum curator LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results.
It's not doing a great job right now. So let's set the level a little lower.
Museum curator LC Kuroda 73 has spent almost 2 years compiling the study into the origin.
Cool, so this is my threshold essentially. How low does it need to be before it notices it? So I need to find a nice spot, but like this breath here.
With some unexpected results.
You can see that it starts to take it out. So
origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results. She says, while many others believe that
kind of magic, it does a really, really good job. So now we've cleaned it up a little bit. So if we think about our processing, we want to get rid of any crap that's sitting underneath it before we start compressing it. And before we start compressing it, we may as well EQ it as well to get a better quality of sound. So I don't need any low plosives that exist.
Of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected results.
Radio vocal.
She says, while many others believe that milk crates are simply viewed as
relatively natural, this is not really making a difference to my sound. So I'm just taking away stuff that I don't need. In this middle section, let's try and find where my vocal kind of resonates a little bit better.
Origins of the multi-purpose item, with some unexpected
so
results.
If I sweep it up and down.
While many others believe that milk crates are simply viewed as cinder blocks for hipsters or makeshift seats for hipsters, they actually have a long history of being used for other stuff.
I've got a little bit of clarity up here, so what I can do is boost it, but if I boost too much in this area, what you might find is that I would be introducing extra sibilants and other stuff that we don't want.
She says, while many others believe that milk crates are simply viewed as cinder blocks for hipsters or makeshift seats for hipsters.
So it starts to work relatively well. We've got a relatively clear sound, we've got EQ, we've got compression, we've got something that seems to sound pretty clear and pretty nice. In terms of additional processing on here, we don't have on my personal computer here, I don't have Melodyne, so I don't have the additional vocal processing that we're going to talk about. You see I don't have it in here, but we can look at that in class next week. So just as a quick vocal edit process, hopefully that makes things a little bit clearer in terms of just chopping things up, getting clear with it. And if I wanted to add some nice natural reverb to this, let's just, because you already set up a reverb. Actually, I'll create a new track for this one. So if I create a new stereo auxiliary track, just delete these other tracks that we're not using, make this our reverb track and put a reverb on it. Let's just pick generic Pro Tools standard deverb. To get sound into here, I need to send out via a bus, set that up to 0, and I need to bring that bus in here. So let's just have a quick look. Oh yeah, make sure I'm not highlighting a tiny section.
Uses. The humble furniture and self-defense item was originally developed as a means of moving milk cartons around, a new report.
Cool. Real washy. We don't really want that. If I want it to sound like a normal kind of room.
Uses. The humble furniture and self-defense item was originally developed as a means of moving milk cartons around, a new report has found.
Cool. So I can EQ it. I can take out extra stuff.
Uses. The humble furniture and self-defense.
And it's a little bit loud in the mix. So this is where I then change the level of the reverb in comparison to my dry signal.
Uses. The humble furniture and self-defense item was originally developed as a means of...
And it's really low level, but it starts to feel a bit more real. Cool. Okay, so that's the basic gist. This session is available on Campus Online. Nope, not Campus Online. Whoop. On Google Drive. If you have a look in the class folder and you have a look in resources, there is this zip file. You can download that and you can muck around it if you want to. But honestly, use your own vocal recordings. You've got your own stuff. Cool. Any questions? Let me know. Thank you.